Now, welcome to another edition of Battle of the Heroes and Villains, where this time we'll be taking a look at the results of the poll that asked, what grade or rating would you give Yoda? We'll then calculate an average score for him that will then compare to all the other characters we've done thus far, before I read and respond to some of your comments. But before we do any of that, let me remind you that you can already nominate or vote for what character we do next. Just head down to the comments and respond to my pinned message with the character of your choice, or give a thumbs up to one already there. Whatever single comment gets the most votes in the next day or so will be the winner. Okay, so let's now get to the results for the poll for Yoda, where we'll see that 74% of people thought he was an A tier character, 20% thought he was deserving of a B, 4% said C, 1% said D, and a final 1% gave Yoda an F. And when we do all the math here and consider A score of 5 and F a score of 1, Yoda ends up with an average score of 4.65, which puts him into second place overall, nearly 0.2 of a point behind Obi-Wan Kenobi. And going into this, I thought maybe Yoda had an outside chance of catching Kenobi and knocking him off the high ground, or at least getting a little closer than he actually did, though a 4.65 on second place is still very respectable. However, now I think there's only one character that has a real chance of knocking him down from there, and I'm actually a little surprised he hasn't won a nomination yet. And even though I don't want to influence any results here, either who gets nominated or the polls themselves, maybe I should remind everyone that, for this list anyway, and we debated this topic in a separate poll, anyway, for the sake of this list, Anakin and Darth Vader are being considered two separate characters, and so far we've only done Anakin. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. And before we get to your comments, let me once again take a quick moment to say thank you to everyone who votes and responds to these polls. It is greatly appreciated. And now let's start, as we always do, with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Harmon2, who said, "He cemented himself as legendary when he gave his explanation of the Force. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings we are, not this crude matter. The fact that Frank Oz could create such moving characterization out of a puppet and act with Mark Hamill so believably, who couldn't even hear him on set, can never be topped." Okay, so though I absolutely agree with you about Yoda's explanation of the Force and Empire being fantastic, one of the most memorable moments in a movie chock full of them, bringing him to life the way they did is also one of the most impressive feats in a trilogy full of impressive feats. And I think a lot of people today, even those who grew up with those original films, kind of forget how impressive they actually were back then, visually, I mean. We've kind of been spoiled by modern day special effects. And though no, Yoda did not look perfect in that film, if you really scrutinize you can find some mistakes. But oddly enough, it's those imperfections that make him feel more authentic in a weird sort of way. Like he's actually physically this creature that's there because, well, he was there. And I know I'm kind of getting off topic, but there's just something about practical effects that even the best CGI hasn't been able to duplicate or pull off yet. There's just something about actually filming what's there over adding it in later digitally. Alright, let's now move on to this comment from Lone Battle Droid, who said, "It's interesting to see how he's changed from the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy. In the prequels, he's at the height of his power, but also at his most ignorant. He's the most powerful Jedi maybe ever, yet he couldn't tell a Sith Lord was right in front of him. When he started to train to become immortal, he gets a sort of reality check and sees that he still has much to learn. It's then furthered when Palpatine defeats him. He learns how truly powerful the Force is, and how he maybe let worldly concerns get in the way of his connection." We also then had this comment from the Senate, who said, "Although he was one of the only threats to my power through the force of memes, he was a respectable enemy. Grand Master of the Jedi Order, he knew more about the Force than any of his comrades. Although it seemed he knew everything, he was wrong about some things, which gives him some depth. I loved the final episode of Season 6 of the Clone Wars, where he learned a lot. He and Obi-Wan were basically the best of the best Jedi. He is an A, but I am an S, of course." Then there was this comment from SammyJammy52, who said, "The greatest lesson failure is, for all its faults, The Last Jedi certainly did this scene perfectly. If anything, Yoda was largely to blame for the downfall of the Jedi, not through bad intentions, but misleading them down the wrong path. He is saying this because perhaps he knows he has failed, and wishes Luke to pick up the mantle of Jedi true Jedi one more time. A funny, goofy Jedi for kids, but a complex and interesting character for everyone. Clone Wars certainly evolves his character also. A for me. Then also we had this comment from Sturdy Potts, who said, I think one of the biggest surprises for me when the prequels came out was seeing a Yoda that was flawed. While I definitely see how he misjudged Luke in the original trilogy, I wasn't expecting to see a character many considered wise to make so many mistakes. That's why I really enjoy looking at how Yoda took the difficult lessons of the Clone Wars and learned humility, which was something that the Jedi were lacking and really led to their downfall. It adds depth to his wisdom and makes him a well-rounded character and an A. And I remember after seeing The Phantom Menace for the first time thinking to myself, they got Yoda wrong somehow. Sure, when you really think about it, he was hard on Luke in Empire. He could even be a bit of an ass when getting his point across. But something about him in Episode 1 felt off. He felt so arrogant, and in a way, it was almost disappointing because I wanted to see this wise, powerful Jedi Master who had everything figured out and in control. It never really crossed my mind going into that trilogy that we might see a flawed Yoda, one who still had much to learn. And I know some will want to make the comparison to Luke in the sequel trilogy, how he clearly didn't have everything figured out either. But the thing is, and again, I'm getting off topic, I didn't expect Luke to be godlike in the sequels. I wanted to see him as a powerful and wise Jedi Master, or Grand Master, but I would have been more than okay if he wasn't perfect, if he too had much to learn yet, or room to grow as a character in some capacity. A story yet to tell about him. It was the fact that he seemed to have given up on everything that was the real problem. Anyway, especially in hindsight, I like what was done with Yoda in the prequels. In many ways, yes, he was the Jedi Grand Master we were all expecting him to be going into it, but there was that arrogance, there was room for him to grow, there were mistakes that he would make, and his arc in the Clone Wars, the final arc of Season 6, is one of my favorite in the whole series because you see Yoda recognizing and beginning to learn from those mistakes. It's the transition from the Yoda we see in the prequels to the one we'll eventually see in the original trilogy. Alright, next up here then we have this comment from Yearlong Giant who said, Yoda is a pretty interesting character, and his introduction in Empire was great at subverting your expectations, because instead of being presented as a warrior, he is a crazy old hermit, which he was just doing to test Luke's patience. Wars make not one great. His arc is very good because he goes from a Jedi clouded by the dark side who uses his lightsaber to solve problems more often, but after Revenge of the Sith, in his exile, he has time to ponder the failings of the Jedi Order. And from a technical aspect, the puppetry was amazing, even in The Last Jedi, but the prequel CGI one still looks great to this day. I give Yoda an A. Great comment, and I'm going to go slightly off topic yet again and talk about pretty much the only reason I could believe the Darth Jar Jar theory to be true, and that's because George Lucas just loves the idea of the little insignificant creature you meet on the side of the road that actually turns out to be something or someone great and powerful. Even Anakin falls into this category, as this random slave kid they encounter that turns out to be powerful with the Force and one day will become Darth Vader. And though I really don't know if that was the plan for Jar Jar Binks, for him to actually be this powerful Sith Lord, but fan reaction to him changed George's mind, nor do I know how I would have felt about that reveal if he was, or how kids who fell in love with Jar Jar would have felt about it, but it may very well have been the ultimate subversion if he had done it, just like how this little green creature turning out to be Yoda, the great warrior Luke was looking for, surprised a lot of people when they were watching Empire Strikes Back the first time. Okay, and moving on now, we have this comment from Umar Sadiq, who said, the fact that we still know little about him makes me want to give him a B, but that's what I love about his character, the mystery, so I'd say an A. We also had this comment from Adam who said, great character and mystery behind Yoda and his species. The way George and Dave portrayed him in the movies and shows has been superb. I am, however, concerned for the upcoming depiction of the species in The Mandalorian. I fear the studio, like with the sequel trilogy, will botch it and or lose the mystery of the Force-sensitive species to metaphorically get butts in the seats. Filoni's a great storyteller, and I trust him. I just pray he has full control over these types of decisions in the upcoming projects. And I too am kind of anxious to see how much and what we learn about Yoda's species in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and maybe beyond that, though I suppose the answer to that question might end up being nothing or next to nothing, we have no guarantee that we'll learn anything at all. Even if he gets taken home to his people, or they come get him perhaps, that doesn't mean we'll actually learn anything about them. We might see a few more of them, which would be cool, and if they talk, we may learn if they all speak backwards, or if that's just a Yoda thing. Either way, if we do learn more about his species, I really hope it's stuff that comes from George Lucas himself, or at least something they run by him. If he's got ideas or a backstory, I hope that's what they go with, assuming he's willing to disclose those ideas, and also assuming he has ideas. For all we know, the reason why we know next to nothing about Yoda or his species is because Lucas himself never really thought about it. I mean, putting Yaddle into episode 1, showing us there is another, maybe almost implies that it's not really meant to be anything special or unique, his species I mean. Then again, who knows, I suppose. Okay, and moving on now, we have this comment from Nick Vegas who said, I remember how the theater erupted in episode 2 when Yoda engaged his small green lightsaber for the first time. I was a teenager and also pumped to see this Grand Master Jedi in action. Looking back now, I almost wish Lucas had kept Yoda as a purely spiritual Force user who had no need for lightsabers, as he had achieved a level of mastery in the Force over his 800 plus years. And it was after reading this comment, and a few others similar to this one, that I decided to make a separate poll asking how people felt about it. So instead of getting into this topic now, I'll just point you to that poll, a link to which can be found in the description below, and say it's a topic we'll pick up in a couple days. Next up here then, we have this comment from Kenji Baka who said, I like Yoda, really I do. He is a great mentor figure and has some of the most well-known Star Wars quotes in the history of the franchise. But as a character in his own right, he is, to me at least, a bit one note. There's also this one from Chaos Heaven 23 who said, speaking as a person who's only seen the films, I gave Yoda a B because he's a fairly two-dimensional character in their context. He isn't bad, I'd say, but he fills the archetype of the mentor really well, and is a present constant throughout all the movies, giving his sage input on matters. His influence on the Skywalker saga is undeniable, and he's a staple of a signature Star Wars alien type, but without something like Clone Wars to expand on him more, he fills a simple role. And yeah, if we look at just the original trilogy, I'd agree that Yoda is, when we really examine him, a pretty two-dimensional character in there just to fill a role. Even Lucas himself has said that the reason he created Yoda was because he'd killed off Obi-Wan in the first movie, and he needed someone to train Luke now. However, the uniqueness and presentation of the character, the numerous classic sayings, some of which we'll get into in a moment, is what makes Yoda so special in the original trilogy. And though not the focal point of the prequels, as discussed before, just the fact that he's different there, that he's arrogant and makes mistakes, adds quite a bit to the character overall, and the final arc of Season 6 in the Clone Wars really rounds out his character well. Alright, and let's now get to just a few final comments here, starting with this one from Will Florer, who said, his lessons are so applicable to real life, and that's what makes him a cinematic legend, even outside of Star Wars. Do or do not, there is no try. The greatest teacher failure is. The list goes on, easy A+. Then this comment from Ahsoka521 who said, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. That one line sets up everything and foreshadows what's to come for Anakin. This is why Yoda is the Grand Master. We also had this one from Liquid Nitrogen 7 who said, if so powerful you are, why leave? Always loved that line. Then this one from Mr. Man who said, when Yoda tells Luke what the Force is, I get chills every time. And this one from Mr. Thompson who said, judge him by his size, do you? Solid A+. We also have this one from Ty1501 who said, when 900 years old you reach, look as good you will not, Need I say more? Then this one from Sneer Mir Near who said, best Yoda line, that is why you fail. We also have this one from Rorschach who said, straight A, no thought required, luminous beings are we. And finally this comment from Nathan K who said, name a single line from Yoda that is not a memorable quote or meme, always with you what cannot be done. And though no, not literally every line he says is exactly quotable or memeable, the point is still good and valid. Because that's the thing about Yoda. He may not be the most well-developed character in the franchise. We may know next to nothing about where he comes from or what his backstory is. But nearly everything he does and says is important, is memorable, and resonates with both the characters on screen and us, the audience. He is larger than life, to be judged on the incredible impact he has on Star Wars, both in and out of the story. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Yoda, or what I or anyone else had to say about him here in this video. Or you can nominate or vote for what character we do next, or go vote and comment on the poll about Yoda using a lightsaber. Either way, leave a comment somewhere and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.